the economy overall, a little bit about the chamber. I'm going to leave plenty of time if you want to ask some questions. We've been very visible lately, and so I'm sure you may have some questions, and we may, I'll talk a little bit about some of that. But first of all, in light of the economy of Grand Junction, I don't have lots of copies of these. You can find them actually on our website. But this is a business barometer, and it's something we put out each month. And you have the most recent one actually in front of you, even though it says March. We get a lot of statistics from the City of Grand Junction, Mesa County, the airport, the Visitor and Convention Bureau, and these are the things that we look at to try and kind of gauge how the economy is performing. So one of the things I think that you all probably have even seen a little bit about is the fact that the city had projected a 3% increase overall when they did their budgeting last fall. And at that point in time, as I had told Rich Englehart's predecessor, Laura Cadridge, at one time, that I thought that he was being just a tad too optimistic. Because I wasn't hearing that from the roughly 1,000 chamber members that I interact with. And I'm on the street visiting with them regularly, and we see a couple of hundred of them at business after hours. So I am on a daily basis talking to the small businesses that are the backbone of this community, and I wasn't hearing any of that. And if you take a look at the sales tax numbers for the City of Grand Junction for the first 3 months, and just the sales tax, don't include the use tax, you will see that sales tax numbers not only did not go up, but have actually declined in the first quarter. January was down 4%. You'll see March was down 6%. February was slightly better, but February is a pretty light month overall in terms of sales tax collections, and I think it was like 0.8%. Now, I will give you a little bit of a projection on what I think is going to happen when the March numbers have come out, which will happen, I believe, relatively soon, probably next week. I think you're going to see March numbers maybe a little bit better. They're not going to be down 6%. They're probably going to be closer to flat. But again, you're not going to see the increase. What I'm hearing from businesses in terms of overall economic activity moving forward is that the first 3 months were deadly, and that in March they kind of started to see a little bit of a pickup. April has kind of held its own, and that as they look at things like our hotels looking at bookings going forward for the summer months, that they're seeing some pickup in activity. And you're also seeing, I think you're going to see some job growth numbers coming out here pretty quickly as well. So I think the worst part of the year economically was in the last quarter. I think we're going to do better, but I don't think we're going to meet the optimistic 3% growth rate in sales tax that city staff predicted last fall. A couple of other things to kind of keep an eye on is in terms of our housing. We are seeing activity. If you talk to any realtor, we're seeing the housing market start to come back. I've talked to a couple of people that actually had their properties sell within 5 to 10 days. But again, those sales are still not the high-end sales. The high-end properties that we saw moving fairly well back in 2006, 2007 are still not moving. These are the more modestly priced houses that you're seeing happen. And in terms of the airport, I was just out at the airport last week, had a good conversation with Rex Tibbetts. Their numbers overall for the year were down slightly, but part of that was actually due to service levels because Allegiant had dropped their Los Angeles flight, and they have now put that back in place moving forward. So I think you're going to see those numbers continue to grow, and I can tell you, as somebody who flew this past weekend, my airplane at 6 a.m. on Friday morning going to Denver was full, and my airplane at 9:30 last night coming back was full. So they're really doing pretty well in terms of that. So overall, you know, looking forward economically, like I said, I think the worst part is behind us. I think we're gonna be flat or grow just a little bit this year, and even growing just a little bit is going to be something we're all going to be pretty excited about, to be honest with you. We also do, and you may have seen some publicity about this, about every 6 months, we do kind of an economic outlook survey, and we ask our members in survey form to tell us kind of what's happening with them. We've been doing it now. This is the start of our 5th year. So we started in the fall of 2008, and every 6 months we kind of benchmarked. And so I just completed that survey, and in the survey basically what we heard was job growth. About 1 in 4 were actually looking at adding some positions back this year in the next 6 months. That's one of the strongest indicators I think we've seen in quite some time. At the same time, you will see that if we have 1 in 4 adding, we have about, I believe it was 12 or 13%, 12 to 14% who said they were going to actually cut payroll or positions, and then the rest of them were going to stay the same. The other number that I look at, and I look at this because of the fact that our economy is really, in the past, has been very strongly based with regard to the construction industry, is what's happening with capital expenditures. And there is no movement yet in terms of a groundswell of activity around capital investment. Our existing businesses are still continuing to kind of keep their cash close to their chest. They don't want to take on additional debt. They don't feel confident enough yet to make those kinds of investments in future infrastructure for their businesses. And that's a pattern we have seen throughout. But the question I always love to ask is, so when do you personally, as an individual, want to see, you know, when do you predict that we are actually going to be a sustainable, growing economy again? And I grew up on a farm, as you all know, and I compare farmers to small businesses in that nothing is ever really rosy. So keep that in mind. You know, if a farmer, it's either they're getting too much rain or they're not getting enough rain. And that tends to be the case with small businesses also. But they keep moving the bar out farther and farther and farther. And in the latest survey, a majority of them said, we aren't going to be out of the woods, we aren't going to see sustainable until the end of 2014 or even beyond 2014. So we're still looking at another 18 months of really some pretty rocky road, I think, in terms of our, lots of, I think the ups and downs that we've seen in the past had been mostly down. I think we're coming back a little. I think, I said last year we were kind of bumping along the bottom. I don't think we're going to bump along the bottom so much as I think we might just see a little bit of a gradual uptick. But keep in mind, I work for the Chamber of Commerce, and you know, for us, the sun is always shining. So, with that in mind, I do want to take this opportunity to talk just a little bit about the Chamber of Commerce. If there has been anything that I have learned over the past 6 weeks or so, it's that a lot of people have no clue who we are or what we do. And I'm sure you guys are much more informed than the average person that I've been dealing with lately on our Facebook page, and maybe a reporter or two in the media. But we really are not funded by the government. We are funded by private businesses. And we have a budget of over $600,000 a year, and almost all of that is generated from the private sector in the way of memberships or support for our various events that we have, like our business showcase, our annual banquet, or products that we produce, like our business directory and our city map and other things. And so in terms of the Grand Junction City Council's decision last week, which thankfully was reversed earlier today, thank you very much, Sam and Marty. But I started getting hit immediately. First of all, the media went back and said, oh, city cuts funding to chamber, $6,000. I just told you our budget's over $600,000. So we're talking, it was a membership. It was 1% or less of our overall operations. But what I will tell you is that KKCO's story managed to hit the AP wire. So I've been following the Google alerts, and so we were, this story actually made the Columbus, Indiana television station. I had one of my peers from California ask me if I would be willing to do a presentation on, what it's like to stand up to the city and, have your funding cut. So anyway, I just want to clear this up. We are not funded by the government. And our mission statement, and I say this at every new member orientation we do, our mission statement is pretty darn simple. And it's probably the same mission statement that we had when the Chamber originally began as an organization in 1884. And that is to represent business and promote economic growth. And that's our key mission. And whenever we do anything, it is in light of those two things. And our members have a variety of things that they join the Chamber for. And we like to say it's not paying dues, it's not a donation, it's actually an investment for your business. And that we want you to see some return on that investment. So we're probably best known for things like our business after hours, our networking at noons, our opportunities for business people to get together, get to know each other, and do business with each other. And that is a huge part of what we do. But what we also tell people at our member orientation is that we take care of some of the big picture issues that you don't have time to as business owners. So that's why we are so engaged in the political arena. That is why we are the only chamber on the Western Slope that has a full-time governmental affairs manager, because we know that what happens in the state legislature, what happens in the halls of Congress, and yes, what happens in City Hall and the county courthouse has an impact on businesses. And it can be very positive, and it can also be very devastating in terms of what it does to job growth. And we're all about supporting job creators. So we get very active in the political arena, and we also do get very involved in what we view as building our community, the kind of infrastructure that not just businesses but citizens use, but we come at it from a business perspective. So we are supportive of things like investments in roads, streets, bridges. We are supportive in investing in our human infrastructure. That's why we've had the Mesa County Leadership Program for almost 20 years to try and provide a basis for young business professionals to get a broad overview of the community, how the pieces fit together, and develop a network that will support them when they decide to actually go out and take a risk by serving on a board, getting themselves appointed to something like the Planning Commission, as one of our just last year's graduates did, or run for public office. So we get very involved in that. And then in terms of our economic development piece, I think there's always a lot of confusion. There's always we have a lot of economic development partners in the Valley. Who does what? And I've always said, I don't care who does what, as long as what gets done. And I truly believe that. So in terms from our perspective, we think because we have 1,000 businesses that are our members, we're listening to them regularly. We think we have a real solid base with our existing businesses to help provide them with the resources that they need in order to grow. And oftentimes that intersects with what's happening in the public policy arena. A few years ago, it was the city's planning process. We heard over and over and over again what a problem that was. And eventually, we were able to get some of that fixed. Same thing with the county. So we work on these sorts of things regularly for existing businesses. One of our major economic drivers in this area has been in the past, will be again in the future, is energy. And we are very dedicated to seeing all forms of energy developed and all the various segments of that energy development happening here in Mesa County. The Mesa County Economic Development Plan's first goal is to become an epicenter for energy innovation, and sometimes people forget this, and business development. So that does mean being supportive of our current natural gas producers, the people who service the natural gas producers, the potential that we've got for uranium, the coal industry, the rare earth minerals, the renewables, oil shale, shale oil, the whole gamut. And that's why we offer a lot of regular energy briefings. Some of you, I've seen at those. You're all welcome to come. They happen every second and fourth Wednesday morning at the chamber offices, and we've got one coming up this Wednesday, May 8th, and it's going to be focused on the National Renewable Energy Lab. Our goal also is to see if we can do more than support jobs that actually work out in the Piceance Basin or down in the Paradox Valley, and actually look to be able to bring some R&D types of positions, some engineering types of positions to the valley. And my poster child for that is the Halliburton bit remanufacturing facility. If you're not familiar with it, Halliburton made a conscious decision about 4 years ago now, with a hurricane barreling down on Houston, that they only had one manufacturing facility for the remanufacture of the bits that go into the drilling rigs, and that if a hurricane hit and they were wiped out, they could not supply their customers. And Larry Kent, bless his heart, up here in Grand Junction said, well, maybe you want to build some redundancy into the system, and they started a facility. It's out in Forsyth Park. They are now up to 3 shifts. They have over 50 employees, and while energy extraction is down in our area, they continue to grow because they're supplying a regional market. That's the kind of thing that we need to be doing in terms of bringing some of those support industry, support services, and the potential for research and development. My long-term goal is to see an energy research and innovation park. I think that we have a real opportunity to team up with Colorado Mesa University, their Unconventional Fuel Center, expand their Unconventional Fuel Center to include Conventional Fuel Center. I'm not quite sure why we're just focusing on unconventional at the moment. But really look at some of the R&D things. I actually toured an energy park down in Houston a year ago, and I've been kind of spreading the gospel that we need to go visit them. They have curriculum. They're training petroleum engineers on this in this energy park. They're doing basic research in terms of wind turbines and how you anchor them to the ocean floor. They have a huge federal grant to do that. And as well as they have a diesel performance lab that they're working on various fuel mixtures in terms of diesel fuel to cut down on emissions. And they're one of the certified testing areas, so they have a lot of private industry support in terms of the various fuel mixes that they've got on site. And it's only 5 years old. And I think that we have some real potential if we think big in terms of that whole energy arena. We have a lot of opportunities that we need to capitalize from an economic development standpoint. And it does even out what happens with commodity prices over the long term. So that's kind of from an economic development perspective. I can talk just real briefly, and I will, about what's going on. And I think Kathy did a great job on a legislative update, but I will tell you, we haven't focused a lot of attention on what's been happening so much, or at least our local media hasn't, at the state legislature, and that's a shame because there's a lot of job-killing legislation that is making its way rather rapidly through the legislature. Thank God they're set to adjourn on Wednesday.
Yeah, they can't do any more
damage. That does create a round of applause.
Yes.
But there's one bill in particular that if you have a chance to shoot off an email to the governor today, please do so. And it doesn't have anything to do with the 19 energy killing bills that they've introduced. It's actually a bill called 1136. And what it does is it's devastating to every small employer in the state. And I don't misspeak when I say that. In terms of employment law, most of the time, if you're a very small employer, the government understands that you don't have a full-time HR department and that you don't have the ability to provide all of the benefits that are required of some of the larger employers. And so if you have under 15 employees, there are some special graces that are kind of given to you. 1136 is basically allows a disgruntled employee to sue an employer of any size in state court, even if it's a federal statute that they're, even if it's anti-discrimination, it allows them to go to state court. And the proponents of the bill, the Democrats, have said, well, but we've capped damages at $25,000, and so a business can afford that. The problem is that they have not capped attorney fees. And some of the information that we've been getting back from our members in employment law is that you could run up a sizable $25,000, $50,000, $75,000 bill trying to defend yourself against these sorts of suits. So it's really a bad bill, and it hits every business right between the eyes. And the governor has to veto it today, or it becomes law by the waiting period. So that's one, if you have a chance, shoot something off to him. Obviously, from the chamber perspective, we have signed on with a lot of business associations across the state and have asked him to veto that. And if you had a chance to look at the paper yesterday, we're asking him to veto several bills, because that's really our last line of defense at this point. There's a union lockout bill that guarantees unemployment insurance benefits to those who are locked out. That's due to the grocery industry. The problem with that, even if you're a small employer, is that people don't understand that unemployment insurance, the money that goes out to pay unemployment benefits, comes from businesses. And so whenever you expand that, what we've seen is a fund that is largely teetering on solvency. We've had to borrow from the federal government, and our employers are having to pay to keep that fund solvent. Expand it to this when you've got unions that actually do have benefits for their members anyway, and it's a problem. So there's just what?
That got pulled.
Did it get pulled?
It's threatened to veto.
He threatened to veto it and it got pulled? Thanks, Duncan. All right, awesome. One down.
Yeah.
But at any rate, and again, 252 is a horrible bill. Thank you for bringing that one up. Even though we here in Grand Junction may not be affected, it has major impacts for a lot of the folks who come to Grand Junction to do their shopping. Our rural communities surrounding us, that renewable standard is not good. So anyway, so that's kind of it from the state side. On the federal level, we have the BLM Resource Management Plan, we have Greater Sage Grouse, we have a lot of issues that we've been weighing in on as an organization with regard to our public lands. It's just, we kind of feel like we've been under assault. And then we come down to the local political environment. And I want to thank each and every one of you who worked in the city election this time. I think we have elevated the need for qualified candidates. We've paid a lot more attention to who it is that makes these decisions. And I think that in and of itself is good for the community at large. From our perspective, I'll be happy to answer any questions about our secret handshake, or the robes that we wear at the chamber meetings with the skull and the lighted candle, or the shadowy, side organization that we have that has $250,000 to get the Brady issue passed. So that's I'll answer any questions that you've got with regard to that. It's been a delight.